it's Emily here with Jen. And in this episode of Unfiltered HR, we're going to talk about retaliation. So,
the number one.
Yes, if you guys aren't aware, the number one claim made against employers when it comes to discrimination and harassment and with the EEOC and the Division of Human Rights. So, if you don't know what that term is, we highly encourage you to tune in. A lot of people inadvertently get in trouble in this area because it is so wide-reaching across many areas of employment law for employers. So make sure to check it out on tips on what it is, how to avoid it, and covering your butt as we go into next year. And yeah.
You want to cover your butt.
All right.
Go Bills.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Unfiltered HR. As usual, I'm Emily from Ally HR Partners.
And that makes me Jen from Complete Payroll.
All right, today we're talking all about
retaliation.
Retaliation. Say it together, boys and girls. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Retaliation. All right. We're actually, before we get started, we're here again at Convergence Co-working Space in Hamburg. So if you are someone who works remote, freelance, or just want to get out of the office one day and change up your scenery, this is a great place to go.
Beautiful.
Check it out. There'll be links around on their rates and address and all that stuff. So thanks to Marie for hosting us once again, and come check it out.
Yeah, we'll have her contact information on this page, on the blog page as well. But there's a lot of restaurants right around here, so you could have lunch and dinner, and it's a great spot.
Yeah.
The sun's coming out. You can't see, but
sun,
trust us.
It is.
Trust
Here
us.
comes the sun. Right. All right. So, Jen, the concept of retaliation. The reason why the timing of this is good, or we're talking about this right now, is because, as we talked about in a recent episode on what you need to do to prepare for the end of 2022 with the sexual harassment training, this relates to that, and just in general, retaliation claims or claims of retaliation that employees make against employers is the number one charge by far at both the federal EEOC level, the Division of Human Rights in New York State, and that can relate to making sexual harassment claims and being retaliated against for that, or just other general employee protected rights and activity that employers are not allowed to retaliate against employees for. So we're going to break down what retaliation is, what it means, and how to make sure that you don't even inadvertently do things that are perceived as retaliation, so that you put yourself in a good spot to not get in trouble or have to fight off these claims. Yeah,
because there could be something that happens that may not have anything to do with the first instance. So we're going to kind of break it down of what that means and what you can do to protect yourself and protect the employee. Everybody's wanting the same thing, which is just the right thing, right?
Yeah.
So let's just kind of go through that and ways to protect the employer and the employee.
Because the moral of the story is that you cannot retaliate against employees for exercising the rights that are given to them from the federal government, the state government, whatever it might be. So that's kind of like a good bridge into the first topic of what is retaliation, right? So like we all know the dictionary definition and what is it for. So when we talk about retaliation, we're talking about negative action that's taken against an employee for basically, again, either exercising their legally designated employee rights or their rights to make complaints, or against, basically taking action against them for making complaints. So when we talk about employee rights, we're talking about things like, Jen, like applying for a leave of absence or taking FMLA or paid family leave, filing a workers' comp claim, filing a sexual harassment claim, using paid sick leave, right? These are all things that employees are entitled to do, and even if it's an inconvenience to you as a business owner or a manager, you can't take negative action even in the slightest way against employees for these things because that is protected.
And negative action, I think you may automatically think negative action is saying, even saying something like, we're gonna have to find coverage for that, or passive aggressive kind of things. That's kind of one way of doing it, but also what are some other ways of retaliation that includes reducing hours, right? Yeah. Things that you can kind of associate. All of a sudden, there's a change into the employee. So
Exactly, yeah. So the retaliation is, basically it's defined as occurring when there's some sort of like material adverse action taken against an employee that can be tied to one of these protected activities or protected rights. And so what is material adverse action, right? Like, pretend to be a lawyer here for a second. But, basically, it's adverse action or negative action that can be tied directly, again, to that exercising of a right or the complaint that was made or whatever it might be. So Jen, you're right that obviously that could be something very objective or obvious, like terminating someone, right? If someone files a workers' comp claim or complains about working conditions or talks about their pay with another employee, which is also protected activity. If you fire them for that, that is very obviously going to be retaliation. But it could be other things like switching their shift to one that's less desirable, or making overtime less available to them compared to other employees, or snubbing them in some other way. So
there could be so many things that kind of veer off that, right? Like changing your office space or your where you are. It's just anything that's, I think you use a great term, less desirable. You just got to be careful of that.
Denying time off requests all of a sudden that typically wouldn't, be denied or aren't with other employees. All these little things, right? So, and these are material things to an employee. So just make sure you understand the scope of what retaliation can be, what it is, and what the real risk is here. But again, want to emphasize what this applies to: exercising rights, but also the complaint scenario, right? So again, if someone's complaining about wages, complaining about working conditions, things like that, that is protected. So you want to make sure that you're not taking adverse action, and not just you as the business owner or operator, if that's who you are watching this right now, but also all of your managers and supervisors. So as we've talked about before, there's this concept of vicarious liability, which means that anyone who is a representative of the employer or the business, which would be your managers or supervisors, those people represent you. So all of their actions are deemed your actions in the eyes of, the law and the government. So if they're retaliating, that means you're retaliating. So you need to make sure they are educated on this subject as well, so that they know not to be passive aggressive, make comments that inadvertently might imply that they're, snubbing an employee or taking negative action against them, because those are all little things that can very quickly catch fire and lead to some claim of retaliation, even if it's not, even if it's not really tied to that.
Yeah, and on that same note and other hand, if that makes sense. Are we on a note and a hand? I don't really know. But what I want to say is if you are an admin, an administrator, and HR, you got your HR hat on and you're watching this video and it's the owner that's kind of doing these things, it maybe inadvertently, it's communicating that importance. So you could be the owner and you want to make sure that your next level down is creating that right sort of environment for you. But if it's kind of vice versa, that may be a little tough, right? You have to talk to the owner about these things, but it's very, very important that you're getting that across, because sometimes they're not as in touch with the employees, or they don't know the employees as much as you do, because you're doing all the groundwork and you're facing the employees every day, and you're all of that. So they may be making decisions based on what they're seeing on a spreadsheet or a computer, and they may not know these other things that may look like they're being retaliated against. Yeah. So it's important to have that constant communication both ways, between the administrators and the owners, and the owners and the administrators. Everybody's on the same page of that, because it can be looked at both ways.
Yeah, it's definitely worth educating people, people in positions of authority or power in your business at all levels on this topic, because they are the ones that could be accused of and found guilty of retaliating, which could lead to trouble for you. But on that note, want to be really, really clear. This does not mean that you can never take negative action against employees for things that are, legal or, allowed. And really it's about understanding, where that line is, and understanding to be careful and cautious in these situations where someone has recently taken a leave of absence, or filed a complaint or something like that, you just want to tread a little bit more carefully and lightly in those situations when you're considering disciplining for something legitimate like a performance issue or a behavior issue, right? So the key to your defense in these situations, if you're considering disciplining someone or changing their schedule or shift, you just want to make sure that it's cannot easily be tied to that protected behavior, basically. So the tips, and let's break down and give some tips of how you can make sure that there isn't a causal connection between the protected activity and the negative action you're taking. And the first one, Jen, is timing, right? Timing is everything. So if someone comes back from a leave of absence and then all of a sudden you decide you're going to discipline them for performance when they were never counseled on that before, that doesn't look good, right? So even if that's legitimate, you definitely want to consider that approach and the timing of that if that's something that needs to happen. So again, just putting distance between the complaint or the protected activity and the disciplinary action that is for a legitimate reason might be something to consider.
And I think that kind of ties into is it consistent with all employees? So
yes.
the timing is a consideration. If they're having their reviews a month after employees come back from leave, are they doing that for everybody?
Yeah,
that's one
that
thing.
Would be great.
Right,
Yep.
Staying consistent with all the employees, but I think that's the biggest thing where it doesn't appear, and I don't want to say to try to hide it, right? But it doesn't appear as retaliation.
Perception,
You have to stay fair and consistent with all employees.
Yeah.
So it's not retaliation. You have to be conscious of that.
Yeah, and that's the next really key point, is being consistent and fair across the board with all employees that are similarly situated, which is a legal term as well, but within that department or within your organization or within your group as a single manager, if you're the person acting here, if you're going to discipline someone, does history show that you would have disciplined someone else for the same behavior, right? So if you're more strict with this person on attendance all of a sudden than you are with anybody else, that's going to look bad, right? And that's going to suggest that maybe you're disciplining them for another reason that's retaliation or something else. So being consistent across the board, we've talked about in the last episode and several others, having a handbook, having policies and procedures, relying on those, always leaning and being consistent with those, leaning on those.
Documentation.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what the policies, the handbook, that's what that is. And it's not just to have them to check off a box, but it's documentation.
Yeah.
And I think that's, what needs to be, what is the best protection for you as a business owner is to have that documentation if there is an instance. But again, these all tie in together, right? Staying consistent with all employees, documenting everything with all employees, so you have something to fall back on. And anything that's documented, any sort of instance that's documented, is signed off by the employee too. Right.
That's ideal, best case scenario. Right. But even like time-stamped records, like we've talked about in other episodes, if you send yourself an email about conversations you've had, it's a time-stamped record that's permanent in Outlook or Gmail or whatever.
Yeah.
Undeniable proof that conversation occurred. But yeah, Jen, that was the third tip that you beat me to. We're simpatico here. Documentation. We've said before, if it's not documented, it didn't happen, and it doesn't matter what you say. It's not going to hold up. So definitely document things. If you're disciplining someone for performance, but you don't have documentation that their performance is poor or has been poor or not meeting expectations, again, that's not going to hold a lot of water if the claim is that it's really retaliation for something else. So make sure that you're on good standing, good ground, that you have documented proof of insufficient performance metrics, whatever those might be, sales numbers, attendance occurrences, whatever it is, before you go disciplining. And the
disciplining.
The final note is just perception is everything. So just be mindful of perception. I say this all the time. It's part of like a lot of management trainings that I do with companies. Sorry, there's bugs flying around here. I lost my train of thought now. You're gonna have to cut this out, Joe. The final point is perception is everything, right? So if employees perceive that they're being treated unfairly, or perceive a negative attitude or a condescending tone or something like that, that certainly is going to be an issue and might, make someone think that there's retaliation occurring and make a claim or complaint. So control your emotions as a manager. You kind of have to rise above the occasion and just, again, act with consistency and really with objectivity in the application of policies and things, and that will keep you on the straight and narrow course to hopefully staying out of trouble.
Yeah, it's the same kind of standard of the sexual harassment. It's what's perceived and how that other person feels. If that other person is uncomfortable, or same thing here, if that other person, that's what's considered the harassment, the retaliation. If that person feels like that, then there's usually...
And remember, as soon as there's a claim, it's yours to defend and prove that that the action wasn't due to retaliation. So
that's why you want to go back on documentation
and avoid the claims altogether, right? So by being fair, consistent, and not creating that perception. So yeah, that sums up the conversation on retaliation. It's a nuanced topic. It's a all-inclusive topic. These retaliation provisions are built into a lot of laws out there. But with that being said, the scope of it is quite large and it's applicable to a lot of things that we talk about, Jen. So I want to make sure that you guys are aware so you don't inadvertently do something that it could be perceived as retaliation and have to face those claims.
Yeah, and I think the business owners have been extremely, in general and in the Buffalo area, and that's what we know it as, the Buffalo area mostly. We work with clients in other states, but have been very conscious of the different leaves that have come out and when that was going on and not retaliating in that way. So they have been very understanding, and some of them were paid leaves, right, with the pandemic. So you guys as business owners, as administrators and HR, give yourselves a pat on the back. Honestly, you've been fighting the fight. There are a lot of things that you're staying up with, and it's been tough, but you guys have been doing great. And I've been talking to business owners all day, and they're still doing it. So just keep doing what you're doing. Stay consistent. You don't want to look like you're retaliating on that, but all in all, with all those leaves, that was tough, right? When people are taking off and they had to take care of a sick one or things like that. Like retaliation it can be it can go in many ways. So it's.
Keep doing the right things, although it's difficult and there's a lot of things that are being thrown at you at this point. Just be consistent and, you don't have to worry about this stuff basically in the end.
Basically.
Yeah.
So we're here to help you through that. And if you have any questions specifically, hey, this person just came back from paid family leave and they're showing up late every day and I don't want it to look like retaliation, something specific, just email us and ask us and we'll kind of,
this is exactly the kind of stuff that, I personally work with clients on all the time, right? Because they know that there's a pretty complicated legal landscape out there in terms of employee protections and all of that stuff, which, is fine and well-intended in that, but you shouldn't be afraid to do, what you need to do as a business to keep operating and, protect your business as well and hold people accountable when it's warranted. So, reach out if you have concerns or questions about doing that. If you have a legitimate reason to and want help navigating it, that's what we're here for.
That's what we're here for.
All right.
Well, thank you for watching. If you would have any questions, suggestions, if you would like to host us, we would love to be there. So please email us at unfilteredhr@completepayroll.com. Thank you again to Marie for hosting us here in Hamburg at Convergence Co-working Space. It's been great. I love it here.
Yeah.
So thank you, and
come on down.
I can't not.
Cheers.
Go Bills.
Go Bills.